Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Mr. Whisper, photographer and author of London After Dark. Please enjoy Mr. Whisper. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today I am here with Bal, who is a photographer and has an upcoming book called London After Dark. And I'm super excited to have you join me today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'm very excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, I am very excited to chat with you about creativity and hear that experience of what it is to be a photographer and street photography versus studio photography. I'm excited to hear more about that. But before we get into more of the nitty-gritty details, if you wouldn't mind just letting our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Of course. I am Bal Bhatla, and I'm probably better known as Mr. Whisper on the internet. I'm a street photographer, and I'm also very proud to be a Fujifilm ambassador. I specialize in low light street photography, which is what mainly my new book, London After Dark, is about.
That's wonderful. For those listeners who are unfamiliar with street photography and low light photography, could you share a little bit about what they are and maybe how you got into that version of photography?
For sure. So street photography in general is, for me, it's about capturing the everyday or those mundane moments and making them into something quite beautiful, emotional, and something that people can connect with. And I was specifically drawn to low light street photography many, many years ago, probably over a decade ago, when I was introduced to my first proper camera. Because when my career started, I started just with my smartphone, and that was all thanks to Instagram. It was that transition from a smartphone to the big camera, which really opened up the night for me. Because previous to that, with a smartphone, I would always have to use a tripod in order to make like decent nighttime photos. But once I moved on and I got a Fujifilm X-T1 camera, it opened up a whole new world to me. And I was like, how come I've only been shooting in the daylight? Now I've got this whole other world to shoot in. And I was immediately drawn to it because firstly, not a lot of people were doing it at the time. So that had, I thought I could build a little niche in that spot. And secondly, there's something very kind of cinematic that comes with the night. You're working with natural lighting, and people are a little bit more kind of free and unleashed during the kind of after dark hours.
I love that. And I love how changing the apparatus you're using shifted what you do and how you do it. And I think people forget that when we open up to a new camera in your line of work, but a new form of creative expression, what can happen. And so I love hearing how it shifted and changed for you in that moment.
Oh yes, it was certainly eye-opening, and like I said, I just couldn't believe that I hadn't been doing it more, and the fact that like you said, the new camera just opened up a whole new world for me.
Yeah. Well, when you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
So creativity or being creative means a great deal to me. If there's one thing that I'd like to be remembered for, it wouldn't be like for being kind or humble or, handsome, shall we say. I'd love to, remembered as being creative. It's always been something in me. Previous to becoming a full-time photographer, I worked in advertising, and I was a designer that worked his way up to being a creative director.
Mhm.
And alongside those long hours of advertising, I would also do passion projects alongside it because I felt that I needed my own creative outlet, something that I could work on, that I could own. And that's actually how my name, Mr. Whisper, came around, because I wanted to have something to house all my personal projects under. And so I put everything under Mr. Whisper Productions. And it was only when social media started, I thought, you know what, I don't really trust the internet, and I didn't want to use my real name. And so I brought Mr. Whisper back. And since then, it's stuck as, it's become my brand, and it's stuck quite well. And people seem to remember it.
I love that. And I love just kind of the journey of having a job that is requiring you to be creative, in quotes, for a career. And knowing, I mean, props to you for knowing yourself well enough to have the passion project to keep your own creativity alive. I'm curious, was that something that you just knew you had to do to keep your creative life flowing, to have that career as the creative director, to continue to express creativity for the advertising agency? Or was this something that someone said, like, maybe you need to have little passion projects on the side? How did you come around to that?
No, it's something that I've kind of always done, I would
Mm.
say. And I'm quite, to use not another word, passionate about it, because it's just, to have that freedom at work. When I was at work, there were certain guidelines I had to follow. I worked with some very cool brands, particularly when I was working with Apple on the launch of the iPhone, so way back when.
Mhm.
And we were trying to, work out how we could explain to the world what apps were. So building microsites and so forth. And I remember there was one particular client who was really difficult. All the other clients were cool, but there was this one guy who was called Hiroki, and he was very difficult. And he actually inspired the project. I was like, I'm gonna make him into a character. So I drew this little ninja character, and I turned it into a sticker pack. And then I remember I made them into actual stickers, and then I would leave them around like Soho and Central London for people to pick up and
Uh-huh.
just like hashtag them if they'd found them. So for me, it kind of worked with my work. It was
Mhm.
introduced through my work, but it was really important for me to always have like a passion project. Even today, when I'm, working on photography briefs, I have my, multiple passion projects going on, which just give me the freedom to ensure that I'm constantly learning new skills, and
Mhm.
like, taking every opportunity as something, new and a great challenge.
I love that. And so important, I think, for individuals who have a career that is asking for so much creative output, that you have to have that curiosity and learning to input, like to soak up some creativity for yourself so you can keep putting it out into the world. Now, I understand as a creative person, and things don't always go as planned and we have to pivot.
Oh yes.
When you are faced with some of the creative challenges, how do you navigate those challenges and pivot to something different? Or how do you use creativity to help you shift those challenges?
Well, I most of my creative challenges will come in the form of a brief.
Mm.
So, I see every brief as an opportunity to do something new, do something
Mhm.
exciting, and do something fresh, no matter who the client is. They might be a bank that just wants something very serious, but hey, have you seen this stuff that, people are doing? It's pretty cool. So I
Mm.
like to, explore different avenues and use everything as a new kind of challenge. And one example of that would be earlier this year, I was very lucky in it to work on the launch of the new Fujifilm X106, which was probably the most highly anticipated camera of all time. And it broke all sales records when it finally launched. So I remember when they landed me with that project, I was super excited, very honored to, to be able to take on that role. But I also saw it as a great challenge, and I wanted to do something new. Now, I'd
Mhm.
worked with Fujifilm in the past on launching other cameras, the X-T5, and they have a very they have brand guidelines which they have to
Mhm.
stick to. So when they make a video, there's a certain pace, there's a certain tone that it's done in. So when they approached me with the X106, I saw this as an opportunity to say, hey, why don't we try something a bit, fresher, a bit newer?
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if people are going to like it or not, but it's going to be a departure from what we normally do.
Mhm.
And thankfully the client was up for it, so I was able to put together some slides for them and just say, look, this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. And it was new ways of, you know previously they would only use Fujifilm cameras, and I
Mhm.
said, why don't we use some other cameras which give us like real, like it's like a personal point of view kind of um view of what I was doing. So if the camera was in my hand, the camera that was filming would be just shooting my hand and following my hand along. So we used new equipment for it. We used different techniques, so using slow shutter speed
Mhm.
and different and various camera techniques as well. So for me, that was a great opportunity, and it's a video I'm very proud of. I'm yet to put it on my website. It's coming, but it's on YouTube. But yeah, that's an example of how, when I'm faced with a creative challenge, I love to challenge the client so
Mhm.
that they can tread into new territory with me, and hopefully we'll both have a win.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love the your willingness to challenge someone else's creative ideas and creative experience and expression, because it doesn't always go well. I'm speaking from experience. And it sounds like you're really able to paint the the excitement of what it is to try something in a new way and how it could expand a brand or include a new population of individuals who might be inspired by something done in a new way. So I love hearing about that. I'm curious, when you kind of started photography, are you a self-taught photographer? Is this something you went to school for? How did you kind of step into this world?
So it's funny because I really, dislikes probably a heavy word, but I never saw myself as being a photographer, especially when I was like very comfortable in my advertising life.
Hmm.
And people would always say, "Oh, creative directors always have a camera around their neck and they're documenting every moment of every day." And I was like, "No, no, no, I can't do that. It's just cameras are way too technical for me."
Hmm.
So what I found was, it it was oh, sorry, I've forgotten the question. I got so into it. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, my question was just around, like, are you a self-taught photographer? Did you take classes? How did you kind of expand this knowledge from the advertising world into this world of photography?
Got you. So right. So going back to my point of the fact that I never I didn't ever see myself as a photographer. I always found cameras way too technical for me. And I think for me, it was through Instagram, the app of
Hmm.
Instagram, which made the photography playing field kind of level. You were able
Mm.
to upload photos with a smartphone,
Hmm.
and that's all you could do at the very beginning of it. And so I really, really loved that. And I was immediately addicted to it. And that's how I found street photography as well, because
Hmm.
I would be traveling, I'd be doing long hours at work, and my only chance to photograph things would be to and from work. So I would
Mm.
start shooting like candid moments on the tube every day.
Hmm.
And that proved to be very, very popular. So I knew that a few of my friends who were on Instagram were making a living from it. So I thought, how are they doing this? And I had a little bit of insight from my work. because we would be working with influencers or
Mm-hmm.
photographers or videographers to make content for us. So I said to myself, maybe I could do this one day. It could be for me, but especially with just using a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I'd been on Instagram for about a year or so. I'd been spending way too much time on it, getting home from work at 8 p.m. and then just editing photos. And next thing I
Mm-hmm.
knew, it would be like 11 p.m. So I was like, I need to start monetizing this somehow if I'm spending so much time. So
Yeah.
I just at the time you didn't really have any contact details on your Instagram profile, whereas you do by default now.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I just put my email on my profile, and over the following 2 weeks, I got into some brands got in touch, and they were like Adidas, Lonely Planet, and Jaguar, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. How could they just want to work with little old me? And I ended up working with them on a few projects just using my smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then that followed on to doing kind of bigger things. I did the Adidas. Worked with Adidas to shoot the World Cup in Brazil again, just with my smartphone. And it was at one point where I finished a project with Lacoste, and they said to me, we love the photographs you've taken for the campaign, and we want to put them across all our stores in Europe. So here's a big check for you. And I was like, hang on, I've only shot these with my iPhone 4 or something, so I can only blow them up to A5. And they were like, oh, well, ripped up the check. And it was at that point I said to myself, right, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it properly. And I went off to buy my first big camera,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the Fujifilm X-T1. And that was, how my transition from just a smartphone photographer,
Yeah.
self-taught, and then moved on to a big camera. And then, took me a few months to pick up how to use it properly. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I was then able to start shooting at night. So yeah, that's my journey in a
It's
nutshell.
quite an incredible journey to using all of the platforms and working with brands and figuring out how to then use a camera to expand all of that. And when you think about kind of your life, what's your earliest memory of being creative?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's quite a funny answer. I remember. So for me, I think it was, we used to have a small shop. My parents owned a shop.
Mhm.
And I remember my brother had this brand new computer, which I was never allowed to use unless he was there, as is the way with older siblings.
Yes.
So I was very jealous. And I remember when my parents would come home from kind of the cash and carry, or where they'd get all the stock for the shop from,
Hmm.
I would like be looking at all the different boxes that they had got, because my plan was to take those boxes and build them and like cut them out and make them into my own office and computer and every single peripheral that I would need. So I still remember that. I was very young, but it was such a labor of love. I'd really enjoyed finding the right box and thinking, oh, that could make a great monitor. And then I would cut out the screen, and then
Yeah.
I would mark it up, draw all the buttons on it with a marker
Mhm.
pen. And before I knew it, I had a fully fledged office with printer, fax machine, telephone, you name it, I had it in there. And
That's amazing. I love it. Yeah, I mean, the creative imagination and willingness to, I mean, as kids, there we have so much imagination, but the fact that it was supported, that your parents said, sure, build an office out of boxes. What a gift to be
yeah,
given that. Yeah.
I'm such a cheap date.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, when you are kind of shooting pictures or taking photographs, I'm curious, like, who or what is kind of inspiring you on a day-to-day level? Is it something that you see that is inspirational, or is it something that you hold within yourself that inspires you? in your work?
I would say it's probably a good mix of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a bit of a like a squirrel. If I see something shiny and like it gets my attention, then I think, how is there a way that I can implement that thing that's caught my interest into my photography?
Mm-hmm.
Or I also go out with, certain ideas in my mind, which,
Mm-hmm.
I could have picked up from like a recent visit to the museum, a
Mm-hmm.
film that I've seen, a magazine that I've been reading, or also, books are a big part of inspiring me, especially old street photography books. They certainly make me, think about what I'm going to do and how I can document our world right now in a similar light. So, inspiration comes from all different sources for me. It might just
Mm-hmm.
be from an off the cuff conversation or trash TV that I'm watching. I mean, stuff that I would never admit to, but I'm like, oh, that's quite cool. But yeah, it's I really find inspiration comes from anywhere.
I love that. I think when we're open to it and allow inspiration to inspire, I think that that's something that not everyone, when I guess my experience is many people will censor themselves before allowing whatever it is to fully be inspiring. And so it
Mhm.
sounds like you really follow the inspiration, and there isn't that censorship that you're or already negotiating with yourself of like, is it going to be good, is it not? You're fully invested in what it is you're doing.
Trying something new. I'd really, really, really like to do that. Always challenging myself.
Yeah. So for people who might be very new to the world of photography or new to creativity, or people who are struggling to tap into their creative self again, how would you encourage them to do that?
Well, I would certainly say, a lot of people spend way too much time scrolling on their phones looking for inspiration.
Mhm.
I'm guilty of it, hands up, definitely. And it's certainly a great, I find social media certainly does play a role in that for me. But
Mhm.
it's more when I'm kind of out and about in the real world,
Mhm.
like I said, at museums, at the cinema, just out on one of my photo walks is, it's incredibly therapeutic, inspiring,
Mhm.
for me as well, and very motivating to keep
Mhm.
me doing what I do. So I would, I think that people should really kind of embrace the mundane. Don't, you what people think are mundane things like your journey to work. I
Mhm.
would always switch up my journey to work to make it more interesting. And
Mhm.
that way I would find different stories, different narratives. I wouldn't be on the same train every day.
Mhm.
And that it doesn't have to be that. It might be just when you're doing the laundry, folding your clothes in a different way or putting them in a different place. I just think, cooking a different meal, trying
Mhm.
it's about trying things new and not like, whenever I speak to like my mum, she's very set in her ways and not
Mhm.
and I'm like, I just want to continue to keep doing new things. And I feel if people look into the mundane, are very curious about things, it's
Mhm.
for me, when I do a lot of photography workshops, which
Mhm.
help people to kind of, I call it, kind of training your curious eye, because
Mhm.
it's, you can have a smartphone, a camera, whatever camera you have. It's not really about the equipment. It's about
Mhm.
having that curious eye and being curious about things and seeing how, I don't know. There's always a rhythm or a pattern to things when you sit back and just watch the world go by. And those are the little details that I like to pick up on.
I love the training the curious eye. That speaks to so much creativity, but also how to kind of cultivate creativity in yourself and in your life. So thank you for sharing that tip with all of our listeners. And I'm curious if you could share a little bit about this upcoming book, London After Dark, and what it is and where people can find it and how it came to be.
So it's London After Dark it's my first solo street photography book, and it's something I've been working on with my publisher, Trope Publishers, for about, I think since it's been a good 5 or 6 years,
Oh,
because
wow.
originally when they approached me, they wanted to use existing photography that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, 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 no. If, for me to have my own solo book is a huge milestone for my
Yeah.
photography career. So I went back to them and said, I want to shoot everything fresh. Give me some time to do it. Didn't know that COVID was going to happen in between. But they went with me, and originally the book was going to be about I'm fascinated by London, the city in general, and I like to call it my studio. I'm there as much as I can, observing, documenting things, and it just made sense after doing it for over a decade, that I should, curate these images that I've been taking and put them into a book. Like I said, I'm heavily inspired by a lot of the masters from the past, like Cartier-Bresson, Saul Leiter, Vivian Mayer. I love their books. And something that called out to me from their work was the fact that you'd get this beautiful view of what the world used to be like. And the colors, the typography, the fashion, the cars. And I said, I want to make my own version of that, and I've certainly got enough material to do so. And so the book, then transitioned from, it was supposed to focus on transport and stuff, London transport, and then it transitioned into London After Dark, because that was where my real passion lie. And there were, again, not too many books out which document that. So for me, I'm very excited for when it comes out. It's out on August the 7th. It's available on pre-order now from the trope.com website. And I just can't wait to get the first physical copy in my hands, because everything's so digital these days.
Yeah, well, congratulations on this upcoming book. I'm excited to take a look at it myself. I just have one last question for you.
Yes.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
So for me, that's similar to the first question, but I don't want to repeat my answer. But just for me, it's a way of life, really. It's something that's got me through some of the most difficult times of my life, because I know if I can kind of focus on a passion project, then that will help me kind of balance out the good with the bad. And I just feel that, yeah, if you kind of cut me, I would bleed creativity. And yeah, I not much more to say on that, I think.
Well, you have
Caught me
said
out.
quite a bit about creativity and your experience with it, so I appreciate all of the answers. If people want to learn more about the work that you do, how they could find you, get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
Cool. So you can, if you want to see more of my commercial work, you can go to my website, which is mrwhisperstudios.com. And on there, you'll find the various workshops that I do, my commercial work, and all the gear that I use to make my work. And then if you want to see more of my personal work, you should go to my Instagram channel, which is @MrWhisper. And if you want some more tips and tricks and tutorials, I'm slowly but surely resuscitating my YouTube channel, which is Mr. Whisper TV. And there'll be some new videos on there, which kind of give you a behind the scenes look of how I create my work. So, yeah. And that's everything from me.
Well, I will put links to all of those in show notes and a link to the book so that people have easy access. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, they've been brilliant questions. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.